Hey, Lauren, happy Tech Bros birthday. This is our first live birthday celebration. I'm allowed to say that, right? Because we put it in the announcement. I'm not like
No,
revealing
you're not. You're not doxing me.
So what's your sign? You're not a Scorpio. You'd be a
I'm a Libra, I think, is what it is.
okay, yeah. Which is, very very scientific start to the show there. So
I haven't read any horoscopes in years. I mean, I don't really think I ever did, but yeah, I don't know. It's like, what are you, Mary?
I'm a Pisces, March.
Do we get along? Do Libras and Pisces get along, or
Our guest might know. He's a very smart dude. We'll bring him up in a couple minutes, but he knows about a lot of stuff. I don't know if signs are his thing. If not, I'll do some research after the show. So let's talk about your blog real quick, just because it's. I got a lot of messages about your blog because you called out my former employer. Give us the 20-second blurb about what you wrote about yesterday.
Oh yeah, let's see what kind of fireworks go off here. I mean, the company High Touch, they've been reverse ETL is what they have been for, I don't know, 2 to 3 years, as long as they've been in the market and doing this. And they put out High Touch events now, and if you look at High Touch events, they've been promoting it, and it's going to be great and everything. Blah blah blah.
As a competitor to Snowplow,
as a competitor to like Google Analytics and Snowplow and RudderStack, and a lot of what CDPs do and other things. Event
orchestration,
event tracking, and and I mean, I kind of wrote up about how iTouch has called out, other vendors in the space, why we're better than this vendor and why this one's better than the other, right? And they basically have been using RudderStack's like open source. There's the source code that you can look at, and they're basically, just took something that one of their competitors created, and basically changed all the names from RudderStack, Rudder Analytic, whatever, over to High Touch stuff.
They were doing a glorious copy and paste, and they didn't cover their tracks, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to do this, like, they can do it. But I wrote up a blog because I think the whole thing's getting kind of ridiculous. I mean, you have a right to do this. If someone wants to put something out there like open source and put it in an MIT license, but like don't change like nothing about like this piece of this and then claim it's your own thing. I don't know. It's too ridiculous. This is like part of this is like, you talk about consolidation. Well, like, this company is now going to compete with, like, they're going to eat through their partners, right? Like, oh, they've partnered with RudderStack, I guess, before maybe. And then, now they're using their stuff and they've been putting out materials of like, oh, here's why we're better than this vendor. And they're going to eat through all their partners. And I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see what happens. I don't think they, are going to deliver on something here. So that's just my opinion.
And as usual, your blog got people talking, and let's do a show pretty soon on how intellectual property works in the software space, because I actually don't know much about that. I have a lot of questions, not based at all on the High Touch debacle, but just in general, because it's different than in other industries.
The whole thing with all this is, and why it's so funny is, like, if you go on LinkedIn or Twitter or anywhere else where people are sharing this around with their thoughts on it, it's all vendors talking to other vendors, and then it's just goofy, like, oh, well, actually, we do that. Like, it's just vendors talking to vendors. Like, where's the customer in any of this? Customer's nowhere, right? Like, isn't that who you're supposed to be selling to? And like, I am very of the opinion that the goofier vendors are in general, like, everyone wants to sell to enterprise. They want big deals. They want, multi-year contracts, right? Partnerships for 2-3 years, at signing. And like, this isn't the behavior that goes on throughout this industry about like how to get this. It's not how you get this business and win this business. And
you could say they're acting like,
well, there's a bunch of vendors arguing on LinkedIn or whatever else, it just looks dumb. Like it looks dumb to like the SIs. It looks dumb to potential buyers. Like, and they're all on Adobe anyways, all the big shops, and like they're not going to switch. I don't know. We'll see.
You could say that they're acting sort of the opposite of what you'd expect from legacy tech, which is the ostensible topic that we're going to dive in today with. Let's bring Phil up. And why don't you introduce Phil, Lauren, or Phil can introduce himself? Who wants to go for it? Welcome.
Phil, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do and how we know each other and stuff like that?
Yeah, sounds good. Phil Hall. I started my career in consulting. I used to work for Accenture. I'm based in Chicago, so got my kickstart in like the epicenter of legacy technology, which is the Midwest. So I have a lot of hands-on experience with that. Left Accenture, went to Looker for a little bit. Looker got acquired by Google, and then 2022 quit Google, started my own consulting company. Super excited to be on the show. I don't know if you could tell by the apparel. This might be the first time I wore this. I think I actually got this as a Christmas gift when I was at Looker, but I figured I needed to channel my inner tech bro. So I put on the Patagonia vest. I put on cold brew coffee over in the kegerator there. So I basically got my own little WeWork setup going on. And then I met Lauren actually through a good friend of mine, James, originally. But then Lauren's amazing at throwing like data-related happy hours. So really hit it off at an event that she had in Austin around one of the data conferences out there, which also I think might have been the cause of some of her DBT views might have been seeded from that particular event as well. So I was there for that origin story potentially. And then whenever I'm in New York, she's always one of the first people I got to call up, hang out. So.
Love it. So you are one of a few of the consultants we've had on here. Laura and I both do a certain amount of consulting. What's your kind of focus with you started the consulting coming out of Google, which was coming out of Looker. Is that sort of your pitch as a consultant, is specializing in the Looker side of things?
Admittedly, like it's very easy for me to get Looker work if I want it, but I wouldn't say that that's like necessarily my pitch. I think there's a lot of situations in the data world which require improvisation. And I always jokingly refer to me as like the Wayne Brady of data. So it's basically like if you just have like scenarios and you don't really know to get started, you just have a suggestion, like I'll just take that suggestion and run with it. So I didn't have like a super concrete like go-to-market or business model when I left. I just knew what I was passionate about, the types of conversations that I wanted to have, the types of people and companies I wanted to interact with. So I've done everything at this point from multi-million-dollar like staff augmentations, which would be like full stack data, to like 10 hours a week of data coaching and just kind of advising data leadership, how they should structure their team, how they should align their technical product roadmap with their business outcomes and goals that they've been tasked with. So it's a bit all over the place. Not like a super specific niche.
But also that was beautiful about consulting, right? Because there's the excitement and lack of boredom that goes with being a little bit.
2024, I might need to start focusing a little bit. We'll see. Everything's been going well so far.
We'll have to read the star charts for 2024 to see what you have to be doing.
Yeah, I don't know if you two get along, by the way.
We hate each other.
Yeah, you do? Okay. I feel like if you read a horoscope, you have a higher propensity to not like the person that like the other person is. But if you just ignore them completely, you're just.
What's your sign, Phil?
Yeah, so when they added the 13th one, I think like I'm technically a Cancer now, but I used to be a Leo. It's like so I was like right on the border.
End of July, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm rocking the Obama birthday, August 4th.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Well, you have to become president. Like otherwise, it's his birthday. It's not your birthday.
Yeah, that's why I called it the Obama birthday, not my birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when are you running for president?
Well, I'm a little younger than you because I just found out your age earlier. I won't let that slip though. So I've got a couple years where I think I'd be legally even allowed to consider it. So we'll just leave it at that.
All right, so 2028.
Yeah, sure.
Right on. Well, yeah, I mean, we brought you on, Phil, because like I don't know, I guess we're doing like Lauren's old do a legacy tech theme today. Legacy tech is something that like people like to throw around because it makes potentially a competitor seem old, or people, oh, that like old legacy system, that Microsoft SQL Server thing that no one's really looked at for 4 years, but it kind of runs and does its job, or really anything. Like it gets thrown around a lot in our industry and in what we do about what is legacy, what isn't legacy. Like I would even say, like, is something legacy once it's been around for 3 years? Is something legacy in the market? Like, is something legacy because the market says it's legacy, even though at your company, maybe you just implemented it a year ago? Like, what does legacy tech mean to you? And what are some of the things that you think about when you hear this come up? Because I know you worked at Google and Looker, and like a lot of times you were replacing things that were considered legacy, and you still work with this stuff today. So curious to hear like what your broad thoughts are on all
Yeah.
this.
So first off, I'll say, Looker was especially guilty of using you need to migrate away from your legacy tools. Like that was huge. Admittedly, I was never very personally successful with that approach. And I think that's just because in slower moving markets who have been attached to legacy tech, I realize I'm kind of not directly answering your question, but I'll get there. In like slower moving markets that have had more established like legacy tech there for a while, the pitch is easy, but the amount of like political buy-in that you need to get takes like 3 to 4 years. So how much? And for me, I was more on the engineering side of the sales, so it didn't matter. I could take that risk. But if a sales rep needs to hit their quota, it's not a very strategic move to say like, hey, massive conglomerate that is still using, I don't know, punch cards for some of your computing process. You should modernize. And like, they might be really excited about the idea, but that's a 4-year deal cycle. And actually saw that one of my very first conversations that I had when I was at Looker, it's now been 6 years, and they just signed an ELA with Looker. So like, I actually had a lot more success avoiding the like legacy migration stuff and just say, let's focus on new data stuff that you want to do. Because then we don't have to worry about dealing with like cleaning up all this and assuaging the procurement person who gets box seats to the Cubs game every year from that vendor because they've known them for so long. Let's just like find a niche that like those tools can't go into, and let's start there, and then you can focus on expanding later. So anyway, so I definitely pretty experienced with it. I would say the answer is honestly, at its most extreme, anything that's not the most up-to-date model. So what are we on iPhone now?
I think we're on 15 now, right? I believe.
So yeah, so
I'm like 2 behind or something.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
even
an Android. I'm an Android person, so I don't keep up with it. So I'd say the iPhone 14 is like, if you really wanted to take it like a super littler approach, and that's I think why data strategy exists, is because legacy happens almost instantaneously. There's always going to be something immediately newer or better or maybe more efficient, and you as a leader need to be able to make that choice of saying, well, am I okay with legacy? Like, do I need that new feature? Do I need that extra compute? Do I need that extra speed? I mean, you see that all the time with like people, right? People just need to have the cool, sexy thing. The difference is they have dispensable income. If you're a company that has 5-10% net profit margins, you can't just always be buying something because it's the latest cool new thing. Like, you have to actually rationalize: is this something that I need to go do? And so that's what I've seen a lot.
How are you successful in ripping out legacy tech when you'd win these? Like, what was the narrative?
So I mean, that was a situation where the legacy tech had to break first. Like, if you had gone in there and said, we just need to remove this legacy tech, it's time to upgrade, like, I don't think it would have gone well. So essentially what happened in that particular situation is they had some other systems that were very, very critical: accounting, HR, payroll, and those were getting upgraded. and those needed to be upgraded because they were core technologies that were actually needed to drive their business. Like when all of your labor is people who punch in and punch out and collect paychecks, that becomes a very important use case. Anything operational and finance driven is the most important thing, because even though like products are being sold, revenue is always coming from rent and leasing costs and like franchisee fees. So you don't actually need to like optimize pricing so much, as long as people are selling enough that they can stay in business and they can keep paying the rent. So like the really bleeding edge analytics use cases are never going to be super top of mind until they've reached a level of maturity. So once those legacy like systems that were actually used in their day-to-day operations started to either get sunset or they needed to get upgraded, that then had a downstream effect on all of their legacy reporting solutions as well. So once the pipes broke, that became the opportunity to say, it's like, hey, we're not modernizing because we think it's cool. We're modernizing now because you actually have to. And so that's a really big difference. And that's one of the really, I think, the more fun aspects of coming out of the consulting side is in sales, you would have to try to force that mentality shift. And you try to like invent ideas of why things would be breaking that would force that modernization. But here you can just stay abreast of your contacts and your network. And when that opportunity is there, you can step in and make sure that initiative is successful. So that's probably the biggest one, is you're just not trying to force things. You're recognizing that there's a clear need, and then you can come in and make sure that journey to do that modernization from legacy to something new is much more successful.
But either way, it's a long slog, right? Even when you're popping in at the right moment, it's still.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm always a big sucker for analogies. I just got a haircut the other day, so I'm gonna use that as an analogy here. So let's say that I back in shout out, thanks. So during COVID, like as most people did, I just cut my own hair, right? Had a little buzzer. It was actually, I think, a beard trimmer technically, and then I just go and yeah, the haircut was done. But then as COVID stopped being there and wedding season kicked up, I also noticed some people in my family started having receding hairlines, and I was like, you know what? Like I actually have a full head of hair. Maybe I should try to do something like unique with it. And so sometimes you have companies that I feel like fall into three buckets. You have one company who's like, you know who has great, beautiful, luscious hair? Like all of these people. What's one thing in common that they have? And they're like, oh, they have the Dyson Airwrap. So I go out and buy a Dyson Airwrap. That would be the dumbest thing ever, because like I'm like that. It's just like I wouldn't know how to use the Dyson Airwrap. The Dyson Airwrap probably isn't even for me. Like there's probably like a whole nother audience and like type of body.
It was big during COVID.
Yeah, so that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they're just like, you know what? I see beautiful people. They have this, therefore I should also have this. The other bucket is, and this is actually kind of where I fall in, but I decided to go to the other one. Is I knew I wanted to do something with my hair, but I had no idea. Like I'm not like especially passionate about it. It's not my core competency to like style my hair or make my own hair. So you go to a barber and or a salon or something, and then you'd say, hey, I want to get my hair cut. And they say, well, what do you want? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, use your artistic license. I trust you. You see the raw materials that are here. Make something great. And that was fine. But if you go to Supercuts or you go to Great Clips, one, there's very likely that you're just going to end up with the exact same buzz cut you had before when you were cutting your hair yourself. Two, because there's such like a lack of guidance, and these maybe aren't like and I don't want to shame anyone who works at those places, but they're not like the elite like hairdressers for the stars. They probably need a little bit more of like defined requirements to deliver something successfully. So I probably end up where I was before, or they made a mistake and like I actually am worse. And I think a lot of organizations do that with consulting as well, is they know that they need to modernize, they know they need to be able to do something, but then they go out to generic Indian staffing firm consulting company because they have the skills. They get all these ambiguous requirements. They say, I want to be pretty. And they're just like, okay. And then the next thing you know, like there's just like random buzz lines like all over your head. And so what you actually need, if that's like your type of persona, is you need to go pay $50 for a haircut. Sounds like super painful. I know, like nobody likes the idea. Well, at least men. I don't like the idea of spending $50 on a haircut. But then you're getting someone. When I say like I have no idea what I want, but I trust you. Like I know that they're so good at cutting hair that they're gonna like create something that's going to make me feel good about myself. And that's almost the kind of like Band-Aid that I think organizations need to rip off when they're making these big decisions is you can't just say, I want to do this without having a clear direction. If you know exactly what you want, then sure, go to Great Clips or Supercuts. But if you have any kind of ambiguity there, you don't know how to package what the business needs into like clear specs or requirements, you need to pay a premium to make sure you get those people who can ask challenging questions, ask follow-up questions to better probe where you want to go and not be afraid to push back if you start making demands that just aren't possible.
And that's
possibly
the best pitch I've ever heard for a consultant there. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah. So like, if I made like a stupid request, like my barber would have actually told me no. They'd be like, no, that's dumb. You don't have the right hair for something like that. I'm not going to do it. And that's the type of person you need in your corner from a consulting perspective as well.
Yeah, it makes total sense. That's probably the first of many analogies we're going to get here because I've worked with Phil a lot, and it's one of his bread and butter things. But you said something interesting earlier that, you're based in Chicago. You're from Michigan, went to school in Indiana. You're in the Chicago area right now. You're a Midwest person. That's where you've, lived. And, you said this is the center of legacy tech or something like that earlier in the show. And like, how is that different? Like, you've worked with people from all over the U.S. and I guess internationally as well. How is it different, like the New York or Silicon Valley or Boston approach to like what happens in Chicago and what happens in your market?
Yeah, and I think some of that delineation almost comes to like the maturity of the predominant industries there. So like New York, Boston, you get a lot of biotech, a lot of medical, a lot of finance. So those I think already are probably like generate a lot of high performing, ambitious people that probably have a pretty high acumen and level of intelligence. So it's not maybe the same thing as on the West Coast where everybody wants to like be bleeding edge and like pushing the bounds of innovation, but they have enough sense to like recognize where cost efficiencies can be made and like the right investments to make. And when you're working for a company like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, your entire business is making the right investment. So like when that's your core competency, you're probably actually pretty good at buying tech because you that's what you do across all industries every day. So I think that's like one of the differences of the East Coast, where in the Midwest, you think about a lot of manufacturing, a lot of supply chain, a lot of shipping and logistics, a lot of retail. And I was having coffee actually with somebody who works for a company that basically like makes bolts, right? Not the most glamorous job in the world. But you know what? They can sell every bolt for $1 and it only costs them 20 cents to make the bolt. Even after you factor in like overhead costs and everything, it's a profitable business. They don't necessarily need to like innovate a lot of things. There are probably certain things like the shipping and like the platform used to sell it are like, those are going to be like big competencies. They're going to want to make sure that they have done well. But when you have a certain enough market share and you're well enough established in an industry like that, you don't even have that much competition. And if you start thinking about what it would take for a competitor who maybe was more technology like adept to break into that industry, like there are so many like barriers to entry in something like that because the amount of like decades of relationships that have already existed there. So what was kind of interesting is they came from a more innovative like telco company from the East Coast, and then found themselves as like head of AI and data products at we make bolts. And there was like a certain process that wasn't running fast. They went and talked to their data engineer and they said, hey, like this isn't fast enough. Can you do something about it? And they were like, well, what do you want? What steps would you like me to take to make this faster? She's like, I don't know, tried a different partition. And they're like, well, what do you want me to partition it on? And then like, so then they partitioned on it and it still wasn't fast enough. So then they're like, can we like make some more iterations? Like, well, what other steps would you like me to take? And so it went from this clear like shift of, I work at a cool innovative telco where we're implementing like the data mesh buzzword and we're working with cool open source technologies and we're building all this stuff really rapidly, to my entire team says that's supposed to be the experts are saying what column would you like me to partition this on? And I like it's such a very Like it's not even like on a spectrum. It's just a pure flip of a switch in terms of just like that type of conversation.
Yeah.
And that's so prevalent, I think, just in general, because like I think the same sort of thing with like, what was it, like Reynolds? Like they like make aluminum foil, right? Like what cool data things are you really going to do? Like you might need to get in some futures hedging, like depending on like how like aluminum prices are, but like you have a specialized capital markets team that does that. Like there's no one like in corporate Reynolds that is like, you know what, I need the best and greatest data technology for us to be a profitable business.
See, if we had planned ahead for all your analogies and stories, this would be the time where Lauren and I would pull out the tinfoil hats.
Yeah,
I specifically said aluminum so that Lauren wouldn't pull out her tinfoil.
Yeah. Oh, it's actually aluminum. There's no tinfoil anymore. It's always been aluminum or aluminium. If any of our friends across the country are listening, but no. I mean, you bring up a lot of good points about all this with switching costs and like what are these teams really doing in different industries, different sizes. You and I have worked with tech companies and large companies, and it's just a total different ball game at all of them and what needs to be done.
Yeah, and sometimes the tech companies, and this maybe plays into your RudderStack thing, is they just want everybody to think that it's their technology. So we sold Looker, and I won't name any names here, to some big tech companies in the West. And half the job of the professional services team was to skin it and turn it into an internal BI portal that the only people who knew that it was Looker would be the people who bought it. And to the rest of the company, this was our proprietary, amazing analytics suite.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, the white labeling that goes on is always interesting. I mean, I've done these projects a lot in my career. It's always funny when it's internal white labeling because, and if people don't know what this term means, like, basically like you're putting your own lipstick on whatever pig you bought, or, it doesn't have to be a pig, but, it can be something really cool. But, you're removing the branding from a vendor and you're making it your own thing. I've always thought it was so interesting when this was done to things that would be exclusively internal facing. It really gets into like, you see this a lot of large companies where, everyone wants to like put their stamp on something and roll it out to other departments. And I always thought that because it makes sense why you'd want an outside customer to like think that your platform is something that you built from the ground up, proprietary, whatever. But the internal ones
all blame for yourself. Which is like, it always seems so dangerous to me. Like you have to be so confident that what you're buying and labeling as yourself is going to be amazing. Because like my favorite part about switching to being a services vendor now is because I know enough about all these products. If they don't work, I get to say, go submit a ticket. They're going to tell you that that's a feature, not a bug. Here's how you tell them they're wrong. And then and you actually get to like have that conversation. But if it's something that you say is yours, then that means like they have to come to you to submit a request. Right. You then have to submit a request, and then while you wait 4 weeks for a resolution, your reputation suffers because you're claiming that it's your own.
Right.
It's when internal branding supersedes like natural risk aversion. Like there's a weird ego incentive thing happening there, I think.
Yeah. And you had at Looker and then Google, you had a great customer support staff as well. One of my favorite things about working with Looker back in the day.
There once was a world-class support organization. Yeah. Anybody who picked up on that knows, and anyone who doesn't.
Yeah. There's a little silliness with there, but well, you brought an honor. This is your birthday present to me, I guess. Is you brought several companies that we want to chat about here of what you think are legacy. And we wanted to talk about, are they legacy? Aren't they legacy? But yeah, happy to dive into that, Phil. What presence, what companies did you bring for the debate about what is and isn't legacy?
Yeah, so it's actually what I was actually going to say. And this is maybe a meaner way of phrasing it. Is like, what are some companies that are at least as old as Lore and that we're surprised are still around? So yeah, so and so just for the record too, like this isn't necessarily meant to like diss any specific company or the way that they operate. This is just more of some things have macroeconomic implications, and it's just surprising to see companies like them exist. Like if I were to say Blockbuster, which technically still exists, that's not a slight on Blockbuster, right? That's just wow, I'm surprised they're still around. Like that doesn't seem like there would be a place for them anymore. But again, everybody company like Sears technically still exists, right? But they're just a real estate holding company and they sell stuff off. Like so, they all still exist. They found
They're one of your Chicago companies. They're out in Hoffman Estates. Everybody knows Sears.
But yeah, so the first one I'll say is Kohl's, which not only are they still around, I think still hold the record for being the largest department store in America. I think by total number of stores. There's been like some rumors over the years as well of them potentially like being taken over and like a hostile takeover or a merger, but still around, still doing their thing. So
they've got their own currency, Kohl's Cash.
Kohl's Cash, yep. Mm-hmm.
Are they? Do you have to buy that in cash, Kohl's currency? Like you put in $100 and then you get $100 of Kohl or whatever the conversion rate.
It's more of like they're more like coupons. I think you spend.
Yeah, or I think like if you return something as well, you have the ability to like get the money back, or you can get like a little bit more Kohl's Cash if you're like willing to. There's some sort of thing.
And if you do you're talking about newer tech, if you do your Amazon return at Kohl's, speaking here as the suburban mom, if you do your Amazon return at Kohl's, they give you anything you return. It's like, here's $5 in Kohl's Cash, just to spend. Obviously,
that's just discounting. They're not like, that's not a gift card that they're doing.
Yeah, I can't go cash it out at the ATM.
Yeah. It's just discounting on a future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, an interesting thing about Kohl's too is like the Kohl family in they're Wisconsin, I believe. Like there's a senator. I think it was Bob Kohl. I can look it up, but yeah, there's Senator Kohl, and actually the company British American Tobacco, which like makes Pall Malls and other cigarettes and other stuff you can find. They're called British American, but they actually have a huge presence all over the world. They actually bought Kohl's and owned it for like 8 years, like in the 70s or 80s or something like that. And then it became its own, publicly traded company after. But Phil, like, why are you surprised they're still around? Like, they're giving away Kohl's Cash.
If you just look at their current dividend yields and the amount of actual profit they're making in cash on hand to just sustain their dividend rate as it is right now, maybe they won't be around too much longer, which is why I think they're always a topic of like, will this company be bought? I think their dividend yield's like 10% right now, so it's like almost they're paying out like a REIT, which maybe after mentioning the Sears thing, maybe that's actually more realistic. Maybe they will become a REIT. But yeah, so they were really interesting. So like, from just like being in the industry, whether both the consulting and then in the cloud, they're also just from like a technology perspective, they fall into that bucket 2 trap a lot from what I reckoned before. Where remember like in the early 2000s, like what do you call the tens? The tens in the early tens,
the knots.
Like Hadoop was like the whole craze, and like all of these companies were like, we're going to put everything in Hadoop. So you have like really, I think, successful retailers who've been able to weather a lot of storms, like Target, for example. They were all in on Hadoop. So they were like Teradata, and then they went all in on Hadoop. And then that was very similar in retail in general. So like Kohl's fell in that same bucket. Like they're like, we're all in on Hadoop. But what really impressed me was that they pivoted so quick. As soon as somebody said Hadoop is pointless, like we got to move to the cloud, they moved to the cloud. Like they were one of the first people to actually cut ties, I think, one of the first like organizations to cut ties with Hadoop and move to the cloud. But then once they were there, nothing I think really changed from the way that they were using data. A lot of tabular reporting, a lot of basic operational stuff.
So they got the haircut, but they didn't do the right haircut.
They had the exact same haircut. So they made an investment, they did a migration, but the haircut always stayed the same. And then they actually like kept trying new haircut people as well. There was a big MicroStrategy presence. There was a modernization effort to go to Tableau. Then they had another migration effort to go from Tableau to Click. So at that point, it was just kind of like, we're just going to like just keep going to, we're going to go to Supercuts, get the same buzz cut. We're going to go to Great Clips, get the same buzz cut. And then we're going to go to Sport Clips. We're going to get the same buzz cut. And yeah, so that's where I feel like everything there is legacy. But it was a situation where even like the desire to get past legacy to an extent didn't either have the right motivations or didn't have the right execution ultimately. Hindsight's obviously 2020.
Interesting. What's your and if anyone wants to argue in the comments, like we'll put you up, or Mary, if you want to post the streaming link, we can pull someone on if they have a thought about any of this, want to chat about legacy, this or that. Phil, what's your second company that you think is legacy?
So I'm gonna pivot, and I'm actually gonna go Nielsen.
Nielsen, okay. They're big in the data space. And for people who don't know what Nielsen is, can you do like the 30-second overview?
Yeah, so Nielsen at its core just like falls into the ambiguous bucket of like consumer research, consumer insights. So like if we were back in the 80s and you were GE or you were Procter and Gamble or you were Unilever, there was only like one company to go to if you wanted to try to get a pulse on what your global market share was or what your brand sentiment was, and that was Nielsen. You would pay them probably some exorbitant fee, but as a percentage of your overall marketing budget, it was probably pretty small. So like win-win. And then they would tell you like across your portfolio, like here's how much of that particular segment or that market within different global areas you are. Or if you're spending a lot of money on digital TV, they would be able to assign you like a brand score or something along those lines. So it's really just like it was a company basically where companies could pay them to say how well respected is my company, how well am I doing using third-party data as opposed to.
And what do you think? What do you think the problem was? Why are they legacy? Is it like I'm going to guess? Here's what I guess you're going to say, and you can correct me or whatever. But I think that like the move to mobile may not have they weren't ready for it, and like the development of the cookie. All the modern like web tracking type stuff. Did they just kind of fall asleep at the wheel? Is that why they're legacy in your opinion?
Well, I think it often becomes more like what's actually accessible. So when you think about like the 70s and 80s, the only real data points you had were TV rating points. There wasn't like a lot of, credit cards were there, but they weren't like super, super prevalent. So you didn't have as much of like the credit companies being able to sell anonymized data to people to try to like better understand things. So it really was just like, we're going to take a sample of what happened in this particular area. There was an ad, and then using statistics, we can make broader assumptions about how the rest of the world or similar groups perceive this. Or if we see the average is this, and with this group of people, there's an over-index, we're going to make that assumption about some of these other products. So I think a lot of it was due to, like at the time, you had a lot of really, really smart people using statistically relevant techniques to take what data they did have access to and then make some of these actual like broad statements. And if you looked at it, like the data would never be like probably 100% accurate, but it was always going to be directionally correct enough.
Sure.
That if you were like a leader, you could at least trust that direction and like take something from that. And now we live in a world that's just completely different. We have real data and it can be sourced from anywhere, whether it's like those companies where you upload your receipts and then they give you money back, or credit cards, or the fact that a lot of business is actually done on e-commerce and there is a direct link between the customer and address and who these people are. A lot of those assumptions aren't as relevant. And then the digital media landscape has completely changed as well. TV is a percentage of overall advertising spend. It's not nearly what it was. So that main foothold that they had there, I'm sure anybody who's ever been associated with marketing has heard the term DMA. Like that will always exist. Like that's a Nielsen thing. Like that's effectively saying here's the area around a core point that will see ads if you purchase ad space to target that DMA. That's not as relevant either. And one of the funny things actually, and it was actually at your event, was before the event happened in Austin, we were all up at the pool. And it was the first time I met one of your other friends, and he worked at Drizzly. And I had a lot of consulting experience with Miller Coors, and I'm obviously very passionate about beer. So like, we obviously hit it off. I work with him a lot now too. And I was like, I gotta know, because I was working with like Nielsen data all the time, because we would like be building data products to help like partners like Circle K create merchandising strategies of like, what should they purchase? How should they display it on shelves? That kind of stuff. And I would say like, we would always see that like, this is how much product's moving. And because of 3-tier distribution systems of alcohol in the US, it's very difficult to actually figure out who's buying something. All you know is that a distributor sold it, and then you know that a retailer reordered, but you don't know if they just blindly reordered it and they just have like a whole bunch of excess inventory, or if it's because they ran out. Like, there's just so much ambiguity. But Drizzly has the benefit of actually knowing who's purchasing it and selling it. So Nielsen had a little party called like direct to customer like channel, right? So like, I don't know if Drizzly was specifically called out in it, but they had like that industry line item there, like in their reports of their data. And I was like, you got to tell me like how close are you? And he was like, well, I can't like really tell you how close. So I said, well, just, are we talking percentage points? Are we talking multiples? And he was like, multiple. So it was like probably overstating or understating sales by 4x, 5x, something in that ballpark. Which again, maybe if you're looking at it as like an entire industry wide and you're saying what's the percentage of Drizzly versus these other ones, maybe that's directionally correct. And like you have a general sense of what the market share is. But when you want specificity and you want like actual data and you want to trust it like completely, it's not really useful anymore.
Sure.
We're gonna bring in a live viewer, Phil. Welcome to Ramona, who I don't know if she's here to challenge your Chicago Midwest perspective, but she's tuning in from Canada. I forget which part of Canada, Ramona. Introduce yourself.
I'm close to Toronto. Hi, Mary,
I love Toronto.
Lauren. Hi, Phil. Happy birthday, Lauren. I put this on as a silliness to your birthday because you always talk about silly companies. So I took it from my daughter's collection and I just thought, okay, this is perfect.
I love it.
I took some notes for Phil. I really loved the analogy you used for, the haircuts. So creative, really spot on. And I wanted to comment more on, I know people who got really terrible skin diseases from using the cheap hair. Remind me the names. Those very. No. Going to the chain.
Supercuts with a great sense.
So I thought maybe you can interject that into the analogy that you used, right? Because it speaks to the pain points, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, fair enough. I guess if we really needed to take that, so I'm presuming this is like contact dermatitis or something like that.
It makes it all that more visceral, the pain, right?
Yeah.
and then you have to spend so much money on a dermatologist and long treatment. So I think just everything that was talked here earlier, I thought that will go right in. Okay. And then I wanted to pivot to Lauren's birthday and her legacy. I joined X only because I was so curious to what Lauren talks about, that it's always brought on in this show that Lauren caused another storm and another storm. So I was so curious. And my question is to Lauren, do you want your legacy to be like that? And I wrote it down. So do you want your legacy to be bringing the attention on those companies that you keep talking about? And I know this week you took on another one, and it seems to be rolling on that you post, you do your research, and then they come back, and it goes back and forth. And I just wanted to throw it out there, Lauren.
My whole thing is that there's a buy side and a sell side to all these data companies. not just companies that like buy data about customers or whatever, but about tools and anything else. And right now, because of where we've been the last couple of years, with low interest rates, yada yada yada, there is so much power that these vendors have over the narrative and how things should be done and the way things should be done. And here's why we're great, et cetera, et cetera. And these companies are very much like they're very heavily financed, like, and they're not profitable. And a lot of them are private. And you know, they're venture capital firm backed, right? Like a couple different VC firms have put in certain amounts of money for, you know, percentages of the company for equity. And so these companies that have, you know, $50 million, $20 million marketing budgets just have been running this narrative. And all the people who do the work and who are like good data engineers or analysts or whatever, a lot of them in the last few years have realized that they can make a lot of money, like not doing analytics or engineering or data science or whatever, and becoming like, you know, the product marketing person at one of these companies or a developer evangelist. And like, I don't really care like about like most companies. I mean, you know, do you or whatever, like do whatever you're doing. But like some of these things are, in my opinion, just like really bad. And like a lot of like technology exists in waves. Like, you know, we were talking about Hadoop earlier. Like if you say we're going to put Hadoop into this company from scratch now, like you get laughed at. But like 8 years ago, that was what people were doing, right? But like now, like people wouldn't take you seriously if you're going to start a Hadoop project from the ground up from scratch. And excuse me, it's important for like people to know like what's going on in the market and like what's going on with the companies, because there's always a front end, and the front end is we're changing the world. We're, you know, saving the dolphins with our business intelligence chart making tool with you know, DBT wrapper backend, and we do ingestion or whatever. We do data observability. We're changing the world or whatever. But like most of these companies are not like that complex. And I think like a lot of people need to shift the narrative, because there are more users and there are more customers, and the power balance is off right now. And if more customers are saying things and the narrative moves forward, then you know the customer gets more power. And I think a lot of these like, I don't know, VC firms that have backed these companies, and these companies are heavily backed, like they're all lost. They don't know how to get new revenue. They're all like kind of facing existential problems. Like they're burning $8 or $5 for every dollar that they make back, and no one's going to give them more money. So I think shifting that narrative back away from them is important. And if I say something and go, you know, show what I've researched, or this is how something works or doesn't work, etc., like people might be very mad at me, and I don't really care. But like in 2 weeks from now, someone else will share their experience somewhere, or someone else will share their experience. And then it becomes like pushing on this becomes part of the narrative. Like in politics, you have the right wing and the left wing. And like nobody can really, like if you want to seriously get elected and be, you know, the president or the prime minister or whatever, like you can't exist at these sides. You have to exist somewhere in the middle. And then everyone, like that middle of where things move, it shifts all the time. And you know, it seems true for technology and everything else. And I don't really think a lot of the current technology we're working with is, you know, all that great. I mean, it's not bad. It just is what it is. And yeah, I don't know. That's my take on that.
I love it. We've gone from legacy tech to Lauren's legacy, and we got a beautiful treatise there, as usual. Lauren speaking in paragraphs, not in sound bites.
Wow.
Love
Are you
it.
happy about your legacy or ambivalent? I couldn't quite tell from that response.
Yeah, I mean, my legacy is, I mean, this is all work. Like, work's a joke, like, right? Like, you know, when you're a kid, oh, school sucks. When you're an adult, oh, work sucks, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really, like, the smartest people are always the most skeptical of their own industries, right? Like, whether or not they say this or they say things in private or they say some things in public, but not others, like, the most skeptical people are the smartest, usually. Now, it depends on whether you know, how you want to advertise that or say something. But yeah, I mean, you know, and these silly vendors, like I really don't like care too much about like any of them because most of them are going to go underwater, and that's the way it is. But customers will still have problems. Customers are still going to have to know how many you know, orders were placed between this date and this date that had these attributes and blah, blah, blah. And that's going to continue, you know, until the end of time. So,
Yeah.
anyways.
Well, I think part of your we're making you sound like you're 150 years old. Part of your legacy too is just that you kind of have fun with this. That's something I picked up on a lot with from Phil
It's
as
all,
well.
it's all one big
You
game.
just
It's all one
have
big
fun with it. So, and Ramona from the flower in her hair earlier, I get the feeling that she's has some fun with it too. Let's
Yes, I do.
love it. Let's wrap with
we got one more from Phil, right?
Yeah,
we got
we say one more. That's what I was getting at. One more from Phil. The third
Yeah,
legacy company. We have Kohl's, we have Nielsen's, and what's the third one?
In hindsight, the other one's a retailer too. I don't think it's exciting enough to share. We're just going to tread over too much of the same path. So
Just give us the name. You don't have to go into details. What was the name?
So the one thing I'll say is interesting on this one, because this one actually still is profitable. I think they will continue. It's just a little surprising, and I think what makes them profitable is kind of funny because I'm definitely not their target demo, but Macy's I would say is in a similar bucket. But I like if you like look at kind of like the intersection of where their like most profitable areas are, because you think about like they're still like around malls and there's some of that more like culture around it. They do have like it's still I think a great brand with all the Thanksgiving parade stuff and everything as well. But or did they get rid of? Did they sell that rights to that? I don't even know. But
they had the parade, so yeah.
But like
they're one of the only department stores I still go into because they keep their look super current.
Yeah, they just sell so much perfume and cologne. Like and like for me it's so weird because I remember I think like when I went to prom in high school, my mom bought me a bottle of cologne as like a present to signify me becoming a man or something. I don't know. And I still have that same bottle of cologne. Like I use it like so sparingly that I'm just like, but yeah, like that just drives so much profitability for them is that particular area. So I don't know. Maybe Kohl's needs to get into the fragrance game harder too.
Yeah, love it. Well, this was fantastic. Ramona will get you back on as a featured guest one of these days. This has been amazing. Phil, where can people find you?
So yeah, I'm based in Chicago, always down to grab coffee or a beer or something. So if anyone's around, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's Phil-M-Hall-Jr. So yeah, that's where you'll find me. Or if you have Untapped, I only have two forms of social media. I have LinkedIn and I have Untapped. Untapped is if you know it, you know it. If you don't and you like beer, get it. But yeah, I post a lot of hot takes and strong opinions on beer over on Untapped.
Untapped, got it. Awesome. All right. Well, great show, everybody. Happy start to your birthday weekend, Lauren. And thank you also for joining us, Ramona. This was fantastic. All right. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.